It's Christmas time in the studio.
Well, you better not.
So, December 22, 2023, we are at the end of the year, Christmas time. We are here bringing you your Christmas dose of Common Sense Ohio, and we've had a little Christmas here we'll get to here shortly, but we do have to talk about our sponsor, Harper Plus Accounting. I've had many conversations with Harper and his team in the last 10 to 14 days, finalizing my tax plan. And if you're a business and you're confused and you're not sure that you got your taxes right this year, then you got the wrong tax accountant. That means they're just doing a transactional thing that you're going to show up for maybe in March for your corporate returns. If you're lucky, you get everything there by March 15, and then maybe in April for your personal returns, and you just hope and pray and keep those fingers crossed that you've saved enough, got enough, or you don't owe so much, or you think you're getting money back, and that's some sort of benefit when it's really your money anyway. Either way, but I don't have those worries because Harper Plus and I have been working tirelessly to make sure that I am on top of it. So I know exactly what I owe, when I owe it, how I'm going to pay it, and I have planned for it. That means I've got money back in my account. So I can write that unfortunate check, but at least I can write the unfortunate check. Harper Plus Accounting, my accountant, could be yours. You can check out all our back episodes while we're at it at commonsenseohioshow.com, where you should go like, subscribe, and you know what? Give us a little bit of review. If you're happy with the year of Common Sense Ohio and you've stuck with us, then you're one of many who have. Give us a like, share us, review us, give us 5 stars. It's not nice to say anything bad about anybody, so just give us 5 stars.
Or send us an email.
Or shoot us an email. You want to be a guest? You like our guests? Well, you can be one too. You want to be a sponsor? You could be one too. So lots coming for the new year. We'll talk about that next time on Common Sense Ohio. But for now, let's get on with our Christmas episode. We missed the opening party here. Norm got to open the package. See, we've got, so for those of you watching on video, we've got it. You can see it. Right from the middle. That's right. So that's our slogan that we came up with sort of haphazardly. And everybody here at the table got shirts. Common Sense Ohio shirts. So we've got 3 different varieties that you can have too. Yeah. So email us. We'll get you one. We'll update the website eventually. But Brett's got his right from the middle. Norm's got his on, which matches the logo on the wrapping paper. And then this beauty we'll open up if I can. And thanks to CBJ Graphics.
And Dan, the producer, has one.
So here we go. Yeah.
Look at that. Isn't that beautiful?
Boy. That's a bad boy right there.
In color.
Live in color.
Wow.
Yeah.
So anyway, that you can get yours if you want it. Yeah, sorry, you can get yours if you want it. All you have to do is email us, and we'll tell you what they cost. Soon we'll maybe get the website updated, so we've got your way to just order one. That would be nice.
Sure.
Other memorabilia coming. Norm is on that. But for now, we should get into it because on December 2nd, 1944, to the USA commander of the encircled town of Bastogne, Norm.
There we go, man.
All right. The fortune of war is changing. This time, the USA forces in and near Bastogne have been encircled by strong German armored units. More German armored units have crossed the river across the river Orth, near Orthville, and have taken Marche, how do you say that? M-A-R-C-H-E, Marche, and reached St. Hubert by passing through Humbre-Siebert-Tilley. Libermont is in German hands. There's only one possibility to save the encircled USA troops from total annihilation. That is the honorable surrender of the encircled town. In order to think it over, a term of 2 hours will be granted, beginning with the presentation of this note. If this proposal should be rejected, 1 German artillery corps and 6 heavy AA battalions are ready to annihilate the USA troops in and near Bastogne. The order for firing will be given immediately after this 2 hours term. All serious. Now, here's what blew me away because I wasn't ready for this. It's been a while since I've read this note, and everybody knows that. Not everybody. We'll talk about the response. But listen to the end of this. All serious civilian losses caused by this artillery fire would not correspond with the well-known American humanity. Signed, the German commander. So they're putting on us the guilt trip of surrender or we're going to kill civilians, which, fast forward, spoiler alert, we didn't surrender.
No. And Hitler killed, somewhere around 12 million non-combatants during the war. So
right.
He wasn't exactly concerned about
our fault.
Civilians.
It wasn't our fault. So let me get what he's saying is we're going to kill civilians, and it's on your conscience if you let us do that.
Right.
And so your only choice is to surrender and let us take over the world.
Right. So what did General Ridgway communicate back to
McAuliffe initially asked.
Yes.
So he was awakened.
Yes.
He was awakened.
McAuliffe.
He initially,
not Ridgway, McAuliffe.
So he was awakened. There's different versions of this, but this is maybe a more detailed. And he says, so they want to surrender? No, sir. They want us to surrender. McAuliffe arose and erupted in anger, which shocked those looking on. He took the paper, looked at it, and said, us surrender? Aw, nuts. And he dropped it on the floor, and the major who delivered the message, Jones, was dismissed. He then left headquarters, McAuliffe that is, to congratulate a unit on the western perimeter that had successfully taken out a German roadblock. So he's on to business. In other words, he had no intention of surrendering.
No. But the Germans got their answer, and they were completely puzzled.
So they were blown away, because here was the answer. McAuliffe wondered aloud. Inside the presence of his staff, McAuliffe wondered aloud, well, I don't know what to tell them. And at that point, Kennard, another one of his leadership, says, what you said initially would be hard to beat.
So they got a one-word.
What do you mean? Said, sir, you said nuts. All members of the staff enthusiastically agreed. So McAuliffe wrote it down on a message pad and said, have it typed up.
A one-word answer.
One word, nuts.
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 And the Germans were like, Nussa? Which is German for nuts.
And here's what it reads. December 22, 1944, to the German commander, all in caps, NUTS, exclamation point, the American commander. He dismissed the staff, that is McAuliffe, and initially, and off to war we go. There's a lot to go. There's a lot going on there.
Oh yeah, right, sure.
But I think the most poignant for today's purposes is that sort of post note on the request to surrender. Like, it's on your head unless you capitulate to us.
Sure.
It's on your soul.
Right.
And then the Americans are so known for their compassionate treatment of civilians. So those who don't appreciate the greatness of our country, particularly at this moment in the world history, should go back and read it more.
Right. And we have a long military history of major events happening, at the holiday season, right? To begin with, crossing the Delaware and camping out, during the Revolutionary War.
Or on Christmas Eve.
And the attack that Washington led on Christmas.
On the Hessians.
Why the Brits and the Hessians are recovering from their partying.
Yep.
And then during the Vietnam War, the President Johnson suspended the bombing campaign against the North to try to get some kind of peace negotiations going. And then they rewarded us, of course, with the Tet Offensive, because all they did was build up their readiness. So, long history here.
In that history, both in Civil War, let's sort of turn this to Christmas, in Civil War times, and certainly in World War II times, with the Germans, there are stories of the Americans and the Germans sort of celebrating Christmas across the lines together.
Yeah,
as like
little isolated
times.
But of course, they kind of ruined that.
And then
with
they shot each other.
Battle of the Bulge.
Well, no, during the Battle of the Bulge, this was happening.
But of which Bastogne was part.
Of which Bastogne was part. So the Battle of the Bulge.
I think it also plays to the soldiers celebrating together. Is the soldiers were just soldiers.
They were just people.
They're people.
They're really boys, most of them.
Right.
Boys.
It's the upper command. It's the politicians' war.
Yeah.
That's what, and the soldiers were playing it out. A lot of them didn't know. They didn't get it. Why are we taking just 1 foot of land? We fought this hard for 1 foot.
Yeah, it's so stupid. Like that.
Yeah.
Well, they saw the ridiculousness of it, and the word the American GIs eventually came in. I don't know if this is the origin of it, but chicken shit. They used to call this stuff chicken shit. Like when there was political orders from above or stupid decisions from the command that had no idea what's going on with boots on the ground. They would call that chicken shit. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also worth discussing a little bit the Christmas nature of this. This happens on December. The attack happened, I think, December 16th, but surrounded Bastogne was on Christmas. And what's interesting is the attack was covered by, I think Hitler probably at the time thought, an act of God, because God was on his side. Cloud cover, the cold, the snow. People in Bastogne say it was the coldest they've ever been. And there's infamous story, great stories about that, about GIs talking about it.
Our airdrops to relieve Bastogne were largely off target.
And they were starving.
The ones that they did get would be like 1,000 left-hand socks or something, or garters or something they didn't need.
They weren't going to surrender. Yeah. And here's what's interesting is our tanks couldn't get traction because of the snow and our air. We had air superiority, so we were winning the war easily at that point. I don't want to say easily because guys were dying, but we had the advantage. We had air superiority,
no question about it.
But it was meaningless because of the cloud cover.
So Ike is asking his generals what to do. And for anybody who's seen the movie Patton with George C. Scott, there is a relatively accurate scene where Ike said, what are my options? Where can I go? What can we do? And Patton says, I'll be there in 48 hours.
Yeah. And they're like, it's impossible.
And they're like,
he was like, what, 75?
It's like, wait a minute.
How far he was away. South.
You're heading southeast right now. You're basically out of fuel. And you're saying you're going to get to Bastogne in 2 days.
And he did it. And
he did it.
He did it. There was all sorts of German. It was pretty detailed plan. They had guys infiltrating behind the lines, posing as army GIs, changing road signs. I think Malmedy happened during that battle where they shot a bunch of American prisoners.
That's right.
There was a lot going on there, but of interest to me, as I read the story again this morning and refreshed my recollection, people wake up on Christmas Day. After this was bleak, man. Our soldiers were running for their lives, from the Ardennes forest because they're like, holy crap, the entire German army is coming. Like, we were in chaos. We were in utter chaos.
Well, their Garands, a lot of the guys were down to maybe one clip left of ammo. Like, they were out of food. They were out of,
and they were telling, like, as reinforcements were coming up, the ones running were saying, "Run for your lives." They were actually telling our reinforcements to run. And obviously, we ended up winning. Patton saw this as nothing but opportunity. He goes, he just thought, well, those idiots, they've exposed their flanks on two sides. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to cut them off and bag the entire German army, which he did. Eventually,
their lines were so stretched. Their supply lines.
They didn't have enough fuel. There's a great movie too. I think lots of stars in it. The Battle of the Bulge, I think it's called. But where they were walking around looking for, they had to get to American fuel dumps to fuel their tanks. Like it was their version of Market Garden. It was a bridge too far.
It was too far.
Yeah, they didn't have enough fuel. They relied on stuff that was almost impossible to happen. But they did get the cloud cover. They did get the weather on their side for almost 10 days.
Yeah.
And then on Christmas Day, we wake up and lo and behold, it's sunny. It's nice and cold and crisp. Our tanks can get traction.
Game over.
Our planes can now see their targets, and that was it. Patton comes, and we win the war. Really. I mean, it was when
that was their final. They shot their wad right there.
That was a death gas.
They
put everything they had into this offensive, thinking they could get to Paris and somehow
and get to the coast,
sue for peace.
They were trying to get to the Dutch. Atlantic coast, and it just wasn't going to happen.
And it was so foolish to think that too.
And he sent his vanguard, his best troops. He combed through what was left over from the Russian front, brought them all west, redeployed, and it just wasn't enough.
It just couldn't happen.
And then we just mopped up after this. Basically,
after this, the spring hits, the warm weather comes. I mean, there was still fighting going on. A lot of guys lost their lives.
The
Hurtgen Forest was like a firebomb of forest fires. A lot of stuff still had to happen, but this was it.
The bridge at Remagen, crossing the Rhine, all that kind of stuff, meeting the Russians at the Elbe, et cetera. But it largely was a mop-up operation. In fact, Ike turned down Patton. Patton wanted to take Berlin. And Ike said, no, let the Russians take Berlin because it's just going to be an urban kill fest. And if they want to do it, and if they want to take those casualties, let Russia have it.
Yeah, I think there was more to that decision, though.
Well, it was politics.
There was a political component to that decision. But of interest in that is we're approaching, May of 44 or May of 45. As we're approaching Berlin, the Germans are fleeing like banshees from Berlin, coming back at us.
Yeah.
And they were all... a lot of them were somewhat surprised that they were getting taken prisoner and treated as prisoners. They thought, come on, help us go fight the Russians.
Yeah, right.
And to some extent, that was a foreshadow of what was to come.
Sure.
Because they realized how bad and these are just soldiers. These weren't the leaders, but they were like,
a year later,
fight the Russians. You're not going to help us.
A year later, we're doing the Berlin airlift.
Yeah.
Because the Russians cut off highway access to Berlin.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Anyway, all right. So let's get back to CommonSenseOhioShow.com, where we've got lots of news, lots of stuff happening.
Let's save, because of your comment last week, let's say 5 minutes for the end of the show. We wanted to talk about our favorite Christmas, either movies, books, whatever.
Well, there is another date on December 24, 1988. The Nakatomi Tower was taken over by terrorists, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay. Couple legal stories. So we talked a little bit before the show about some things, but I wanted to lead off with something I think is just preposterous. So I don't know. I haven't followed the trial, but in the verdict against Rudy Giuliani for his libel suit, where a mother-daughter who worked for Fulton County, I think it is, in Georgia, sued Rudy Giuliani for libel. He was found to have libeled these two women, mother-daughter that worked for the county and the, I assume, Board of Elections. And the verdict is $148 million for whatever he said. And I'm racking, I'm trying to think of what you could say about two people who were public officials, but whatever he said, it must have been outrageous.
Assuming it was liable, how bad could it be to be worth that much money?
Yeah, so he has declared bankruptcy because he can't pay $148 million. He's got $10 million to his name, according to the bankruptcy filing. And I'm just thinking, Steve, you've seen civil verdicts before that are meant to be punitive. They are intended to
that's
punish.
What this is, obviously.
Yeah.
So the libel is an intentional tort.
Yep.
And that makes it, in theory, subject to punitive damages. So there's two types of damages in civil cases. You have compensatory damages, meaning I'm going to compensate you, Norm, for the things that I hurt you. So if I hurt your property, if you had medical expenses, or even if you've got like lingering pain and suffering, those are compensatory damages.
Yeah.
So I should pay you for that. Yeah. And usually what you can do is put some sort of formula on it. You can come up with, your car cost X dollars to fix, or whatever it would be. Or like in a libel suit, maybe you lost this job and you could say your future wages are worth whatever. And these aren't always perfect formulas, but at least it's something.
Yeah.
And then you have this idea of punitive damages. We're just going to punish you by making you pay money. It's like a civil fine that you owe to another person. And I'm presuming most of this is punitive damages, because what on earth compensatory damages could somebody like you could libel me until the cows come home, and I could not come up with $140 million worth of compensatory damages. Right. Like I wouldn't be hurt that much. I mean, look, if you said something about me and my career and you extrapolated out the next 15 years of my earnings, you could come up with a number, but it's not even close to, not even 10 million.
So Steve, this probably, I don't think this is a leap. Rudy, Trump, the administration and the administration's either private or government attorneys at the time were claiming the election was stolen. Mm-hmm. So I am sure what's at the bottom of this is Rudy said something about these two people by name, right? Yeah. And probably alleged that they had committed fraud, that they had not counted legitimate ballots or had counted illegitimate ballots.
Didn't do their job on some, either intentionally or unintentionally.
And I'm just trying to think of $75 million per.
It's punitive. Look, these suits are being brought. I use that in a passive voice, I should say. People are bringing these suits in jurisdictions where they're likely to win. Right. They're not bringing these suits in jurisdictions where they're not going to win. So what I mean by that is they're going to have juries that are sympathetic to their cause, which is against Trump. And that's what all this has come to.
What could a defendant do in this case? I'm just curious. Is there a higher
you can
court?
Appeal. Yeah. So
because it's outrageous.
The first offense to any sort of libel or slander is truth. Truth is a defense. Yeah. So if you can prove that what you said is true, then
I just mean the size of the award.
So then you get to the size of the award, and the first line of defense will be the trial judge, who could whack back the amount if that judge wanted. But again, if they're in a friendly jurisdiction, the judge is not going to do that.
Yeah, the judge didn't do that.
And then you go to the Court of Appeals. And, courts of appeal generally sit above trial courts. And the theory is the higher up you go, the less local bias you have. And this goes all the way back to, say, even before Henry I will even say, these are like back in medieval times, they had itinerant justices, and they would ride around, and you would get the king's justice. So the local lord in the manor was giving you your sink or swim. Anybody who's seen Monty Python knows how stupid it is. And if she turns to stone, she's a witch.
Right.
So the king would come around and say, "We're going to fix this."
If she sinks and dies, she wasn't a witch.
Right.
Either way, she's dead.
There were three ways to adjudicate cases. These kind of cases: compurgation, ordeal, and battle. Compurgation was you get your priests. Ordeal would be like you have to go through you grab a stone and how bad it burns your thing. Or battle, you could fight it out to death. And if this comes out unfairly, then the king would come around and decide you'd get the king's justice. And this is the beginning of courts of appeals. So the Court of Appeals can come in and say, look, I'm removed from the local bias. I can whack back this amount in theory.
So an award is a reviewable thing by an appellate court. It is. Okay.
And if the first level of Court of Appeals doesn't do it, then the next, like in Ohio, would be the Court of Appeals. We have our district courts, and there's, 14 of them maybe. And then this Ohio Supreme Court would get a chance to review it after that.
The language in the Constitution about cruel and unusual punishment, is that only about criminal?
It's generally criminal stuff. So that's the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. And that applies to the states via the 14th Amendment, which we're going to get to.
But not really about civil awards as cruel and unusual.
And
I don't believe so.
And it's sad that you get people, I haven't heard them say this, but they've got these people that heard the ruling going, yes, ruin Giuliani.
Oh, sure.
Oh, sure. It's like, really?
Right.
Are we to that extreme that we have to put him in debtor's prison, basically?
Yeah.
No one wins in this.
Well,
because
he's in his 80s now, right?
Yeah, it's stupid.
You're going to break this man at this point.
Yeah, and I'm not saying if he did what he did and he's wrong. Yes, he should compensate them. If they lost their job or whatever,
Brett,
bet.
I'm willing to stipulate that he did libel these ladies.
Yeah,
just for our
sure he did.
Let's stipulate that he
What's it worth?
But come on, $75 million per lady,
right?
And you would wonder. Well, some jury decided it, so all right.
Jeez,
but doesn't you make a good point here, Brett? Because doesn't it feel a little bit like Stalin-esque purging? It's like we are going to not only win, we are going to skewer and forever condemn anybody who is ever against us, and this is
they take you out of the game forever.
Well said. I was just going to compare this to a game of chess. They took the Rudy Giuliani chess piece off the board for this election. Right, like he can't even function. He has no money.
And I'm not a big Rudy fan, but he's allowed to live. I mean, he screwed up. Pay for it. Move on.
I think he's gotten a little dementia or something in his older age.
I think so,
He has said some outrageous stuff.
He really has.
I doubt he allowed his attorneys to argue mental incompetency.
Probably
he would not do that.
I don't know. I always say this about any of these scenarios. I'm going to talk sort of a mile above it.
Okay.
But I don't know the facts. I don't know all the details and the facts. That were presented, because it means everything. A nuance here or there can change everything. I don't know if Rudy's incompetent. Maybe he is. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's got a little blustering going on, and he just liked to puff up. But I don't know. So it from my perspective, though, looking at it from a mile high, it presents an interesting issue, because what Rudy was doing was representing his client at the time. He was representing Trump. Mm-hmm. And he was going along and doing presentations and putting stuff in court and doing whatever. And, you always say, as soon as you put it in a court pleading, then you have some protection. You get immunity for that. So, if I put something in a pleading, I get protection, because the idea is we want to preserve the justice system.
Yeah.
We want to be able to prosecute civil and criminal cases and give litigants an opportunity in court without being worried about being sued for their allegations. Yeah. Now, I don't know what happened here. I don't know where the comments were made, how they were made, to whom they were made, or any of the circumstances. But I know Rudy was going around advocating for his client. And as an attorney, we have certain standards. Like we can't push an untenable or a frivolous position.
Right.
But that's not a bright line rule. it's like he might have thought at the time that he was given information at the time, or relying on information at the time, that what he was saying was true. So these are all things that I would want to know as I assess this. And Brett, to your point, people just pound the table and say, I hate that SOB, good for him, take him off the table, out of the game.
Yeah. And you make a good point, too, that you hear these comments being made just off the cuff, and Trump does this a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like, how much do you really know about this that you can say that? You're fed the information, and I'm sure his feeders are pretty solid in what they're telling him. I get it, but it feels like that Giuliani situation. It's like, what was he fed? He said, and not that he was set up, but he's enough that he twisted it too much.
And
I think his mistake
gosh.
was naming these women by name rather than saying, I think the election was stolen by people in the Fulton County Board of Elections.
Sure.
But he rolled out their names because he wanted to specify which ladies in the video he saw were doing things that he thought were illegal.
Yeah, and look, I'd love to if I had time, and we all had as much time as we wanted to spend on these endeavors, we could read this transcript, we could order it and read it, and really get a feel for it.
We could call Rudy and get him on the air.
Yeah, we could.
He's got the time. He's got time now. So exactly.
Yeah. Hopefully, he won't do time. But
he may charge
so
us.
Rudy, I will just say this: I think the Rudy of today is different than the Mayor Rudy of New York City.
Yeah.
He was truly a hero in the wake of 9/11 for the entire country. In fact, I thought his leadership of New York City was better than George Bush Jr.'s leadership of the country. I think Rudy was saying all the right things. If you recall,
and he was on his way out too. I mean,
that's right.
Like he stepped up.
He was right there on site, and he turned down money from some of these Wahhabi Islamist countries that wanted to pay their conscience money, for charities after 9/11. And Rudy said, no, thanks. Your money's not welcome here, because if you wanted to stop Osama bin Laden in Saudi Arabia, you could have done it.
Yeah.
But instead, his
stock price at that time was about as good as it's going to get.
That's right.
Like he exported a presidential run, I think, even at some point.
He probably did.
I think he did. That sounds familiar.
And I'm just saying, as a person, I'm sad about this.
Yeah.
From a human point of view, forgetting the money, I'm just sad about it.
Look, it shows you a couple. I mean, look, anybody judging anybody else without at least acknowledging that no one is all good and no one is all bad.
Yeah.
Is sorely mistaken. Right. And by no one, I mean, maybe that you can find somebody. We were talking about Hitler. I mean, I don't know what was good about that guy, but at some point in his life, he was a child.
He was an altar boy.
Yeah. At some point,
literally,
there was that. And he went awry. But, like Giuliani has done some really good stuff, and he's done some questionable stuff. He's said some good things. He said some questionable things.
Right.
And if you, Christ himself, recognize this, let he without sin cast the first stone.
The current mayor of New York City put on a press conference recently where he addressed the hollowing out of New York City, right? And it's mainly due to crime, the lifestyle, things boarded up, and I'm sure New York City folks are thinking back to the Giuliani mayorship and how he brought that city back. And that the crime was at an all-time low.
Yep.
And, he did some good things. That's all I'm going to.
And it's a wreck again.
It's a wreck again.
All right. So, did you, I don't know if you saw this or not, but they are, the Confederate Memorial at Arlington Cemetery is now allowed to be taken down. They stopped it for a moment because they were afraid they were desecrating graves. By doing so, judge says, nope, doesn't even look like you guys have been here. Go for it. Take it down, which... Again, in itself. Now, I want to bring this to Ohio. The man that designed that, erected in 1914, nearly half a century after the Civil War ended, the monument was designed and executed by Moses Jacob Ezekiel, an expatriate, gay, American Jewish Southerner. Now, I bring this up because the memorial is very Confederate themed.
Mm-hmm. Not only that, Moses was himself a Confederate.
Exactly. And he
wasn't just a Southerner, he was a CSA officer.
And I bring this up because he lived in Cincinnati.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. So we have an Ohio tie to this Confederate memorial that, again, a piece of history is coming down.
Yeah, we're taking it down.
Whether it's offensive or not, okay, in some eyes it probably is.
It's not
but
offensive.
In some eyes,
That's
it's
bullshit.
probably not.
It's not offensive.
You know,
I don't think
How
it is
many
either.
liberals go to Arlington Cemetery to honor our war dead? Zero.
That's
None
true.
of them do.
Well,
Right.
and you know,
That's a
this
crock
brings
of
up
shit.
this brings up a huge debate that we've had now in the last decade or so about taking down these. Like, where does it end? I suppose, and you know, to me, you can draw a line maybe at the intent and purpose of the memorial. I mean, look, if we don't remember these things, we will forget them.
All right.
Guess which president was there to inaugurate this memorial? Woodrow Wilson. Okay, the patron saint of the liberals. Woodrow Wilson was there to commemorate when this
Well, he
when
was
they
an abject. I mean, look,
a total socialist. So when they pulled the wrapper off of this statue, the point of this statue wasn't to celebrate the Confederacy. The point of the statue, which features African Americans, by the way, in the statue, the point of the statue is reconciliation.
yeah.
That's what it really was about.
"Quote unquote" lost cause.
You have to
You
go.
know,
It wasn't
you know,
celebrating slavery and the lost cause of slavery.
Understand.
It was
Right.
about reconciliation. What Lincoln said, to Grant at Appomattox, let them up easy.
Let them up, and you have to
Right.
you have to put yourself back in that situation. Like, this was a country, and it just you were killing cousins. Like, cousins were killing cousins.
Absolutely.
And I have debated a very close friend of mine time and time again about this, and he would say just burn them all. They're all insurrectionists. This is a great segue to where we're going. They're all insurrectionists. They're all rebels.
Yeah.
They tried to ruin our country. They seceded. Blah blah blah. Kill them all. It's like, yeah, but they're Americans. And what do you do? Like,
It's like us going to war with Indiana.
This
We have relatives in that state.
Yeah.
If you think,
you
so,
bet. It's exactly like that.
Robert
And-
E. Lee
Yeah.
was offered the head of the United States Army, and they knew he was a Virginian, a Southerner, and he turned it down and instead became the head of the Confederate
Right.
Army.
So in very real terms, he was an insurrectionist. He was a rebel. He was a criminal. He was everything.
And guess whose farm Arlington Cemetery was? Robert E. Lee's.
I didn't know that.
It's confiscated property by the U.S. government is where Arlington is.
I didn't know that either.
Well, there's a story, right? There's another story. It reminds me a little bit of the parable of the prodigal son. It's like you've got to let him back. It's like you got to let him back. You got to reconcile this.
Right.
You have to do it because otherwise there's no end to it. Otherwise there is no bottom to this. It's a slippery slope that goes on and on and on.
It's Hamas and the Israelis.
You can always find
forever.
a way.
It'll just keep going on forever.
You can always find a way to find fault with somebody and never let them back in. And if you do that, where do you stop? Where do you draw the line morally? And where does your sin stop and the others takes over that it's so worse than yours that you get the high ground to say this person has no redemptive qualities? Right. And, at Christmas time, this is an appropriate conversation to have, right? Because that is one of the fundamental tenets of my faith, which is we are all imperfect and we are all struggling to be perfect, and we'll never get there. Maybe later on in the kingdom of God, we get to be perfect, or at least bit around it. And to think that you're on this journey and somehow you have higher moral ground than somebody else, such that you get to judge them and never let them back and never reconcile. You don't have to let them into your house, but to judge people to that end, like we're doing in this day and age.
Right.
Stalin did it, right? And he ended up. These were the great purges, and he killed people that were on his side.
This is all part of that legislation that was passed like 2-3 years ago when Biden first came in, that instructed the Department of Defense to rename all the bases, to remove all markers, to remove statues, everything from Defense Department facilities, and that's why they renamed Fort Bragg and several other bases that were named after Confederate generals.
Yeah.
Right? But that is part of American history. It is not to say
the sad part.
It's not to say that they fought for the right side. It's to say that if you want to look at Army tactics, if you want to look at how you fight a war, these were some of the great generals. And and they were Americans, and they were on the wrong side, right? But to just wipe that out, now you wipe out the lesson that can be given. And I think it says everything about the left that they are taking out in 2023. They are taking down a statue that stands for reconciliation.
They're taking down
they don't want
Western civilization.
They don't want reconciliation.
No, they don't.
They want us to fight. They want us to be divided.
Yeah.
They want us to be, good guys and then evil
they want
guys.
to categorize you, Norm, because you're taking this position as a racist.
Oh, I'm definitely. Oh, sure.
Right.
I'm sure to them.
These are these
Right.
tropes that they throw out.
Right.
And, we struggled with this back to World War II. We struggled with this with Nuremberg. Where do you draw the line in the ranks going up of people you're going to punish versus people who are just doing their jobs,
Right.
And it's a very difficult thing to reconcile, and to suggest that somebody sitting today in a high school classroom or even a college classroom has the moral capacity to do that better than anybody else in history.
Right.
You better look in the mirror, because that's the most absurd notion I've ever heard.
It sure is.
And me included, right? I have no answers to this other than this is a very difficult, nuanced, in-depth analysis to say we're just going to start taking down memorials because we disagreed with how that person lived. I mean,
yeah. Before you start wagging
without judging from their standards as well as ours.
Before you start wagging your historical Johnson at me, right, and trying to take everything that is associated with an evil cause or a bad cause and say, well, that should just all be stricken. Let me point out to my liberal friends that during the founding of the state of Israel, Israeli Jewish pilots flew Messerschmitts left over from Hitler's Luftwaffe. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Should we have burned all the Messerschmitts to the ground?
Right.
No. What you do is you use what is practical, and you move on, and you try to do good things in the aftermath of a Holocaust.
We recruited German engineers and German scientists, and
CIA hired Reinhard Gehlen, who was the head of the Gestapo's counterinsurgency effort. It became a CIA asset. So,
well, look, let's talk about the 14th Amendment, because it came up a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is the Colorado decision, for those who understand where we're going. This is Colorado versus Trump, I'll call it, although that's not it. The idea is Colorado Supreme Court has now affirmed a decision, or actually reversed and or affirmed a decision that says Trump can't be on the ballot. And this was brought by certain electors. So there's lots of procedural issues that were at play here. But generally speaking, the court has said that based on the 14th Amendment, Part 3 of the 14th Amendment, Section 3 rather, that Trump committed an insurrection and therefore, as a office holder, committed an insurrection and therefore can't be on the ballot, can't serve. And there's all sorts of debate about this. And this is going to throw an axe into the middle of the country and divide us left and right. But it is land breaking. A state has basically said we're not going to even let this candidate be on the ballot, and it happens to be Donald Trump, and it happens to be a state that would vote against Trump. So you wonder what this means and where it's going. Norm, I'll let you. I'll give a legal breakdown as it comes up, but Norm, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So to discuss a little history of this. We were just talking about reconciliation. And so when he was elected president as a hero of the Civil War, Ohio's Ulysses S. Grant, U.S. Grant, which a lot of people said stood for Unconditional Surrender Grant, U.S. Grant followed through on what he thought was Abraham Lincoln's philosophy of trying to heal the country in the aftermath rather than the carpetbaggers who instead went down to exploit the poor Southerners who basically were decimated. So at any rate,
these are Reconstruction amendments. So the 14th Amendment is a Reconstruction amendment. 13, 14, 16. I mean, these were like the post. Civil rights era. So the 13th gets rid of the badges and instance of slavery. The 14th starts to apply due process and other things. So it's
how Grant handled the 14th Amendment clause that we're talking about is the Confederate States of America vice president, in the face of this, was elected to Congress. The man who wrote and later served on the U.S. Supreme Court, the Confederate who wrote the Articles of Secession. served on the U.S. Supreme Court and also served in Congress. Okay. And President Grant did not bar or attempt to use anything like what's in the 14th Amendment that's being used ostensibly to block Trump. He didn't even use it on actual Civil War officers from the Confederacy, because the idea that Lincoln had and Grant had was let them in, let them say what they want to say, and if it's more hate, if it's more division, if it's the wrong kind of speech, the idea is to let them say what they want to say and then vote it down.
And they'll be booed out of chambers.
That's right. And maybe the voters will say these guys they're ineffective, and they'll elect somebody else.
Right. So what the 14th Amendment was trying to do on some levels is, and maybe we can say, appease some of the masses and appease. They were saying, look, if you were an insurrectionist, if you were a rebel, you can't hold office.
Right.
What you're saying is Grant said, yeah, I know about that, but I don't care.
That's right.
We're not going to
exactly right.
And because what it says is Section 3. It's Section 3. It says no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of presidents, meaning somebody who elects a president, and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So what they're saying is you can't run for office.
Yeah.
Right. If you fought against the country, and you, having fought against the country, you previously held office in the United States. Yeah. So if you were a sitting congressman or something, or a president or a governor, and you could now not go run for office and run for Congress, basically is what they're saying.
Yeah.
This court has interpreted this to mean that Trump can't run for office because Trump was engaged. I mean, the premise of it, the linchpin of all of this, aside from the procedural applicability, the linchpin is Trump engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the same, that is the United States of America. So in order for any of this to have any merit, a couple things have to happen. This has to apply. This Section 3 has to apply. And, there's a big question. It doesn't ever say it applies to the president.
That's right.
Okay. Or somebody who was president.
And in fact, they took that out during the bill's discussion.
Yeah, there is an old statutory construction, a statutory construction rule that says if you express one thing, you exclude others. And then another one that says usus generum, I think, where there's a list of things and it gets more specific. You can infer certain intent from that. And this doesn't say president.
No.
So the question is, does a former president who becomes an insurrectionist, does this amendment preclude that former president from running for office? And, it doesn't really even say run for president. It sort of implies it's difficult to figure out what it's saying unless you look at it in the context of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And then you can sort of get some ideas.
Yeah.
But this court has said, the Colorado Supreme Court has held that this Section 3 of the 14th Amendment precludes Trump, or applies, and therefore they need to decide whether Trump meets the linchpin, which is the element of insurrection or rebellion.
Right.
So if Trump, they say, engaged in an insurrection or rebellion, this amendment precludes Trump from holding office. That means, therefore, under their local election laws in Colorado, that he can't be on the ballot.
Yeah.
And then there was some questions about whether the people who raised the issue had standing and could raise it, but I'll leave that aside. And there's another question about political questions and whether the courts should resolve political issues. That's a bottomless pit we don't need to go into.
Right.
Oh, wow.
The general matter here is this says that according to the court, that if Trump engaged in an insurrection or rebellion, then he can't
be on
office.
He can't be on the ballot, more specifically.
Now, Trump would say, and his lawyers did say, well, I didn't engage in an insurrection or rebellion, first of all. I didn't. And secondly,
wasn't even accused of it.
I wasn't even accused of it, not yet anyway. Yeah. There's certainly
Jack Smith has not accused him of it.
Well, not
in
yet.
The January 6th
not yet.
trial.
There's different things there. So nobody's ever brought proof into a courtroom and said that Trump is guilty of insurrection or rebellion and proved it with any proof, let alone
or held
beyond a
any
reasonable
hearing
doubt.
or taken any evidence.
That's right. So the January 6th committee, this is another point of contention in this decision. The January 6th committee, parts of it, the decision was admitted, or parts were admitted rather, into evidence. So
But it was not a court, and there was no due process. It was just a congressional committee.
well, look, no, it was a report
Right.
admitted into evidence
Right.
to establish, in theory, and admitted into evidence in Trump's trial or in the election in this case.
In
rather.
his impeachment trial.
No. So the report of the January 6th committee, the judge in Colorado admitted into evidence parts of that report to help prove that Trump engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States.
Not to prove, but to justify their decision.
Because the January 6th report is somewhat held as the Holy Grail, correct?
No, it's not held as a Holy Grail.
Well, I mean, it's an abomination in some people's eyes. That's what I mean.
You're asking the right question. You're asking the right question. What authority should be given to that report?
The Republicans were not even allowed to name members to that committee.
Look, the question though is the report the issue at hand, counselor, is the report admissible into evidence in this trial?
Who cares?
And the judge says yes.
Yeah,
and then the next question is, all right, what evidentiary value does it have? What's the relevance and what can it prove? Either way, they relied upon it in order to come to the conclusion.
Right. In a partisan conclusion. Exactly.
But
by an all-Democrat Supreme Court.
Well, sure. So that would go to the weight, not admissibility, this court would say.
That's right.
So at any rate, they concluded that Trump engaged in an insurrection or rebellion, and therefore the lower court said, look, because it doesn't say president here or because of the language, Trump, it doesn't apply to Trump.
And that's interesting that that section doesn't include president. It includes everything else but the presidential office. Isn't that
It's funny.
Interesting.
And as Norm pointed out, a prior version of it did. And this court actually acknowledges that a prior version of it did. Now, this court would say, the Supreme Court of Colorado would say, that it was so ubiquitously obvious that it included president that they just left the language out.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a little bit of a stretch.
Right.
That's a little bit of a stretch. So,
your RFK, Turley, and Dershowitz have all said it's going to be a 9-0 overturn.
I tend to agree.
Court.
I tend to agree the U.S. Supreme Court's going to overrule this.
And here's where I go.
I don't agree that it'll be 9-0.
That's fine. So the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, Supreme Court of Michigan have already passed on similar, and they're controlled by Democrats. And they all said no. Trump.
Good for them.
Trump can be on the ballot
because this is
the Chief Justice in Colorado is part of the dissent. So this was a 4-3
Democrat, right?
4-3 decision. That's right. Oh, they're all D's.
Yeah.
And he and they're not elected, by the way, in Colorado. And he said that in his dissent that this is stretching.
It is a huge stretch.
A huge stretch.
It reeks of political agenda.
That's right.
It reeks of
it's election tampering. The very thing the January 6th
that's a good point.
Committee accused Trump of trying to do.
You have to ask, what are they afraid of?
It's tampering.
What are they afraid of? I heard Jordan Peterson, of all people, he was on, I don't know, Bill Maher. This is years ago, but it was before the election.
Okay.
And he asked this question. He's like, look, what do you do about the half of the country that votes for the man? And everybody just sort of looked at him and he's like, look, no, I mean that. What do you do with that?
Right.
Because look, half the country supports this guy. Well, so what they're really doing, like they're skewering and martyring in many ways the person that half the country believes is their representative, is their candidate, the person they support. So they're going to take this very personally.
Right. 91 charges against Trump right now. Yeah. And he keeps going up in the polls because they've turned him into a martyr.
This is a martyr. Yeah, this is a martyr.
Now, I'm
scenario.
a DeSantis guy. The only reason I am running to the defense of Trump legally is because this is anti-democratic. This is horrible. I agree. You are taking away the voters' right to pick who the hell they want.
Well, Norm, as I was driving in today, I was thinking about, because it's really going to turn, look, I can't predict exactly how the U.S. Supreme Court will look at it, but one of the issues is, does it apply to the president based on the language of the amendment? But even if you get past that, the question becomes, was there an insurrection or a rebellion? And then you're going to have to define that. What does insurrection or rebellion mean in the context of this amendment? And if you get broad enough, then you are putting at risk Joe Biden, because what did Biden do? He went and signed a bunch of executive orders that have been declared unconstitutional. In fact, Biden signed executive orders after the Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional, and he does it anyway.
That's right.
Right.
All right. Is that an insurrection or rebellion?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And to your point, we've talked about this many times. Just to fix the problem that we see today, watch how far you go with it, because it could affect the other side of the aisle in a few years.
Well, that's what
it's in the amendment.
Turns back on
it's
you.
in the amendment
That's
for
what
a reason.
That's what RFK said. This is voter disenfranchisement.
Yeah.
It is. Under the guise of a twisted constitutional analysis.
Of some kind of twisted, obscure law that hasn't been applied to. I think one person was actually not allowed to run for Congress.
And there's been some.
I mean, it's crazy, man.
A few decisions sort of nibbling around the edges of this, but the U.S. Supreme Court has never really gotten anything square on point here because they never had to.
Yeah,
they never had to. And look, if anybody thinks that this is the way to get rid of Trump, they are nuts. In fact, I mean, then I thought about the consequences of it, Norm. Who's voting for Trump in Colorado anyway? He's not going to win Colorado.
Well, it's almost like they're taking that. Yes, you're right. A majority of it will go to whoever the Democratic nomination is. But they're, like you said, it's a 50-50 race. So it's like we got to take a little bit here, a little bit there. Yeah. That we take the states away that he doesn't have the 50. It's now to about 45.
Yeah,
but it's
still the electoral college. He's not going to win the electoral votes in Colorado anyway.
No, he's not.
So it's all they're doing is empowering him in other places. You know,
think of the headline.
It's a backwards win.
Think of the headline in January. Assuming the Supreme Court grants cert and takes this case, right?
Yeah.
When Trump gets his inevitable, according to Turley and Dershowitz, who are not bad constitutional lawyers,
no, they tend to
kind of know what's going on. Mm-hmm. Imagine the headline when Trump wins this. Yeah. And that's why all the Democratic real strategists, the big brain people who I respect, they're all saying, oh my God, why did you do this? You're setting Trump up for a victory in the Supreme Court.
It's almost like they're looking for that Achilles heel thing. We found something that was so minor in the Constitution. We're going to take this man down.
We're going to get him.
This is confirmation bias. These are people whose agenda has so clouded their viewpoint of reality that they don't have any, they can't see the forest.
Trump derangement syndrome.
Trump derangement syndrome.
I mean, they've lost their minds here.
And look, there is a world here. As I think this through, I'd love to sit down with Dershowitz and kick this around. And as I think this through, they are forcing a scenario where the U.S. Supreme Court gets to decide what an insurrection or rebellion is. And say they determine in the context of this decision that this was not an insurrection or rebellion, then it guts in many ways. I have to look at the elements of what he's charged with in the J6 cases.
Yeah.
But they may end up negating the constitutionality of that prosecution. I mean, look, they're...
Yeah, and Jack Smith has his petition to the Supreme Court, which was accepted by the Supreme Court, to look at the issue of immunity.
And he did that. Look, I'm on.
And it's going to be the same kind of thing.
I appreciate that he did that because, look, I don't agree with his prosecution, but at least he's being intellectually honest about it. Like, look, I'd rather know now instead of put everybody through this.
He's trying to time it. So he's trying to time it for a Super Tuesday where Trump is on trial.
Perhaps.
He wants a March 2020.
He's doing it for a quick trial. I get it. But on the other hand, if you're defending the case, this needs to be decided. You don't want to go try this case, win it or lose it, and then have it reversed on that issue.
So what Turley and Dershowitz have said about Jack Smith's timing on his appeal about immunity is that the Supreme Court isn't stupid. They know
what's going on.
They know what good prosecution is as opposed to political prosecution.
They know what this is.
And why is he trying to rush this? Because he doesn't want this court case to be decided in 2025.
No, I appreciate that. But on the other hand,
2024.
It benefits the defense too. The defense needs to know.
Well, Trump appealed it to the appeals court, and then Smith said, I'll go you one better. I'll appeal it directly to
That's fine. Let's get it over with.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with that. Look, I understand the timing may help. I don't think they can do anything to Trump short of killing the man that's going to hurt his campaign.
That's exactly
really, at this point, I really don't.
That's right.
No.
And that's the Secret Service at the door, Steve, because because you just went there, like Madonna did, you know.
Right. It's like there's nothing short of it that they can.
But you're right. You're right. You're 100%.
You know, the guy is
until he's dead, they're not going to let go.
Yeah. I mean, even if they throw him in prison, I think he wins.
That's right.
Not wins the election, but wins the nomination. Or he doesn't impact.
Pardons himself from inside San Quentin.
Right. So here we go.
Right. Yeah.
This is a time in history we will all look back and think, what on earth was going on?
Oh yeah.
What the hell?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly.
You guys want to do some Christmas stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many other things, guys. We could be here for half a day.
I did want to include
go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Norman Lear passing away.
Yeah.
Norman Lear. Yeah.
Big.
The shows that came out of this, man.
Was he Odd Couple?
What is
Or
it?
Archie Bunker?
All in the Family.
All in the Family,
Yeah.
Right.
and all the
Not
stuff
Odd
that
Couple.
came from the Jeffersons. All the things that came out of these shows that were so
Right.
advanced for its time.
Sanford and Son.
I mean,
Maude,
Good Times, The Jeffersons, Checking In. I don't know that one. Archie Bunker's Place, which is
sort of spin-off.
Gloria, that sort of thing. But just all this stuff that groundbreaking television for its time.
Really
If you watch those All in the Family now, you still have the.
Do you know?
You kind of
awesome stuff.
In All in the Family, they use the N-word.
Yeah.
On broadcast TV. They used the N-word.
Yeah.
They used words like the Jewish word the Jewish insult word that begins with K. Mm-hmm. They used that word. He called Polish people Polacks.
Yeah.
Just this one after the other. Yeah. Right.
Have you seen him interviewed? Have you seen Carol O'Connor interviewed? There's a couple interviews of him. I think because Norman Lear died, I went down this little rabbit hole. But he. I forget who was asking, but he was being interviewed in Carol O'Connor was Carol O'Connor.
Yeah.
And then they asked him, what would Archie Bunker say about it? And he flipped the switch like that. He turned into Archie Bunker. The accent changed, the voice changed, the attitude changed.
Right.
I think it had to do with the environment or something.
Yeah.
But it was awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Incredible actor.
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
Right. He really was.
Yeah.
And one of his best acting jobs ever was in Kelly's Heroes. I mean, just in the
TV series,
bring me my box of medals.
Yeah, and the TV series In the Heat of the Night, he did it
was fantastic.
Great. Yeah, great.
Oh my gosh,
Fantastic.
that probably competes against All in the Family.
And he was able to do that.
Well, that was a serious drama
And overcome the Archie Bunker stereotype because
exactly.
that had to have been a significant hurdle for him. I would guess.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. Picking of the right actor for that because
after the movie, he fit that role really well.
right.
After that movie,
Right.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Well, in 1988, December 24th, there was a terrorist attack, and that spawned the greatest Christmas movie of all time.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, wow.
Here we
go.
Die Hard.
Yeah, I know. You did this last year. I know that's your favorite. I'm with you.
I'm not saying it's my favorite. I'm saying it is the greatest Christmas movie of all time.
Well, man, I'll tell you, there's a lot of good ones.
There are a lot of good ones. And I guess we could develop categories.
Yeah, there really
So you could have like the classics versus the moderns.
Well, and now I watch movies differently.
The comedies.
If they're
Miracle on 34th.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
If there are any
version.
piece of Christmas in a movie, I can classify it as a Christmas. The remake of Jumanji has a Christmas scene in it
Yeah, but that's
at
not
the very
Christmas.
end. I know it's not, but it's one of those people would say, "Well, you could call that a Christmas movie." No.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah,
I mean,
phenomenal.
on and on. I mean, the classics.
All right, so let's start with the best your favorite classic Christmas movie.
Boy, it's hard to top It's a Wonderful Life. It's hard to top. Well, for me, even Home Alone is getting to be a classic.
Yeah.
Isn't Macaulay Culkin like 40 now?
That's what, 86, 87.
Yeah.
The original Home Alone is unbelievably
a great Christmas movie.
A great Christmas movie.
Yeah.
And funny.
But I'm talking classics. Let's go say 1950 and before.
Yeah, so A Miracle on 34th.
Yeah.
With
It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, It's a Wonderful
with
Life.
Natalie
Wood.
Who was just so cute. I mean, I'm sure there's a Shirley Temple movie in there somewhere that I can't remember the name of, which has got to be incredible.
Bob Hope's, the Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, White Christmas.
White Christmas.
Right.
White Christmas. I mean, Bourne was the greatest Christmas carol of all time. White Christmas.
Yeah.
World War II era.
Yeah.
Song. Yeah.
Exactly.
Those were great.
Yeah. I mean, you get
Bing Crosby.
I'd forgotten, and I saw this too. 1971, the Waltons, the Homecoming. It was the kickoff
movie, yes.
of their series.
Yes.
And even though the Mama and Papa are not the same characters,
never seen it.
It's such a great, such a great movie.
It's a great movie
because it's that classic Christmas in the hills, very simple, understanding what the holiday's all about.
Yeah.
It's not the deck out of the house. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just that Christmas tree, it just really resonates.
So look, if we're going to call like 88 or in the 80s classics, you've got, like you said, Home Alone.
Yeah.
You've got Trading Places. Which is
is it called A Christmas Story, the Red Rider thing?
A Christmas Story. That's never been my favorite, though.
No, but it is
Ohio-centric.
It is for a lot of people.
For some reason, I really love that.
A lot of people
I didn't growing up, but somebody turned me on to that, 20, 30 years ago, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And it's like, I really do like that
It's a
movie.
great family movie.
It is.
You can watch that.
And the house is in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah. Just changed owners.
And the setups of the tension it's such a well played out movie. Yeah.
Now, how about comedy? Well, comedies, I guess, Trading Places, phenomenal Christmas comedy. Home Alone's a great Christmas comedy.
They say that the number one rented or streamed Christmas movie now is Elf, which I've never seen. I don't
care for it that much.
I'm not a big Will Ferrell guy.
I think it's just caught steam again. Sometimes it has to lay dormant for a while, and then all of a sudden a new generation catches on it. Because my son's an Elf too, and it's that, and he's in his 20s, So I think it's that has to sit and then comes back because it was never out there for them to see.
Greatest modern Christmas movie, let's say the last 10, 15 years.
Well, I will just say, I
just
happened to catch one. I watched. It was made this year, produced and directed by John Travolta, and it's only a 30-minute short movie, and it's called The Shepherd, and it's it's available for free on Prime if you're an Amazon Prime member. It's only 30 minutes, and it was written by Frederick Forsyth way back, and it features a British pilot who is taking off from an RAF base right after World War II, when the Allies were in Europe, still kind of settling things down. And anyway, he takes off from France, and he gets over the English Channel, and all his instruments go crazy. Okay, and it's at night, and he's in the fog, and he can't see where the hell he's going. He's in a British jet called the Vampire, a de Havilland Vampire, little fighter jet, and he's all by himself. Nobody's up there with him. And I will just say this much so I don't ruin the story, but a certain wingman who died earlier when he was a boy suddenly comes out of the mist, and I will just say guides him. Hence the name of the short story, The Shepherd.
Gotcha.
So it's a beautiful little half hour, and if you're an aviation buff, let me tell you, man, you get to see a de Havilland mosquito and a de Havilland vampire in the same movie. It's incredible.
All right.
Yeah.
Modern comedies, Norm. Bad Santa. I freaking love it. Billy Bob Thornton.
I never saw it, but I hear it's
hilarious.
I hear it's
every year I watch it, and every year I laugh.
I hear it's very funny.
And
he's a good actor.
Billy Bob Thornton's phenomenal.
Yeah,
I've never seen him do anything bad.
Yeah. How about that?
Because all the roles fit him.
How about that Friday Night Lights movie that he did as a coach?
It's phenomenal.
I mean, if you're a football guy, my God, that's the movie
it's
right
great.
there. It's off the hook.
He was in Tombstone.
Yeah.
He was in he did a Netflix series or an Amazon Prime series. Look, he's great.
Yeah, great
he's
actor.
Great.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
4 Christmases. I watched that recently. I laugh every time I watch it.
So this will sound odd.
Vince Vaughn and blonde girl who played June Carter Cash.
Okay. Sure. Gosh, yeah. Not Riley. What's her name?
You know.
Yeah. She's beautiful.
Right.
Reeves. Reeve something.
Yeah, you're right. You're on it. You're on it. Reese Witherspoon.
Reese Witherspoon. Yes.
Yeah. She's a great actress.
Yep.
Yeah. A lot of big movie hits came out at Christmas, so I have this associative thing going on. But after the original Star Wars, I think all the other 8 Star Wars movies all came out at Christmas. So oddly enough, I associate those, which is bizarre.
That's a big Christmas day, or a movie day, though.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just huge. They're
coming out during the holidays.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. There's a great movie that George Clooney is producing, which is unfortunate. I disagree with him on a lot of things.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for this.
Yeah, so my sons were rowers for Westerville Crew, and it's called The Boys in the Boat. And great book. Great. I mean, it's a factual story about a team based out of the Pacific Northwest that competed in the Berlin Olympics, in rowing for the United States, and the obstacles they had to overcome. So a David Halberstam book that it's based on. The epic journalist and reporter David Halberstam.
All right. Well, other than looking good, Clooney hasn't. Yeah, we'll see what he does.
But guys, if we can stay with fiction, so my favorite Christmas story, and I'll be brief, is a short story by O. Henry called "The Gift of the Magi," and in short, I'm not giving anything away because
it's been around forever. So.
You can reread this short story 100 times, and it's new every time. So a young couple, married young couple, who don't have any real money, just enough for rent and food. Christmas is coming around. Neither of them has any money. The wife has the most beautiful hair, and the husband loves her hair and how she does her hairdo, and just thinks that's the most beautiful thing that, and all the great things in life that are great are free things, right? And that this is just what God gave her, was beautiful hair. And so he goes and takes his wristwatch that a pocket watch actually, that he had been bequeathed by his father, and he trades it in for a golden comb for his wife. So he takes it to the pawn shop, gets a comb. That's her gift. At the same time, without knowing what he's doing, she goes to a place that makes wigs out of human hair and has all her hair cut off in order to buy him a watch fob for the watch he just traded in for the comb.
Yeah,
and so they give each other these gifts at Christmas. And of course, it isn't the stuff, right? It's the intent and the thought behind it. Each one
was sacrificing their most prized possession for the other.
Steve.
Yeah,
right. That's the moral of the story, and it's just a lovely story.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds like a tragedy to me, Norm.
Well, they sure demonstrated to each other the depth of their love for each other.
With that, we probably got to wrap it up. I mean, we could talk about the greatest Christmas songs. We could talk about the greatest Christmas albums, and that'd be easy.
Or
just
the most hated Christmas songs.
The most hated.
Oh, God. Right.
But, we probably did that last year, so go back and check it out. Anyway.
Guys, let's telegraph our punches. Are we going to do a New Year's show?
Yeah, I'll be here next Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be around.
Last one of the year.
Last one of the year.
I think we do need to do a PSA for the holidays, though. Don't drink and drive.
Don't drink and
Bottom
drive.
line,
right?
Don't drink and drive. Don't be a stat. Don't take somebody out with you. Just be smart.
Now you're taking income off the table for Steve. If you don't get arrested, if you don't go to jail, if you don't get in jeopardy, Steve will make less. But Steve doesn't want you to do this.
There are 364 other days, though.
Yeah. Don't drink and drive. Look, the easiest way.
Well, how do you don't want to create a holiday memory?
Well,
with an accident. Now, come on,
I will tell you this.
Christmas.
I will tell you this, and then we'll shut up about it.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time, hasn't your business suffered? Because I do a lot of drinking and driving defense. Hasn't your business suffered with the advent of Uber and Lyft and the like? And because now it's so easy just to go get an Uber. You don't have to drink and drive. And you know what the answer is? No. In fact, it's increased. And it's interesting. So I haven't studied this, but I have some theories of why. Because alcohol does what it does. The purpose of that drug is to impair your ability to make calm, reasonable, rational decisions. It attacks the prefrontal cortex of your brain. And that's the part of your brain that's responsible for making good decisions. So if you impair that, and say on your way out, I'm going to take an Uber, and you impair the prefrontal cortex of your brain, well, you may even get an Uber home, but then you're going to get hungry and go get, the fifth meal or the fourth meal at Taco Bell or your White Castle, or you're going to go to the booty call with your girlfriend or boyfriend, and you're going to drive because, after all, I was mostly safe tonight, and then you're going to get caught. Or you're going to go back to your friend's house where everybody rallied for the pre-party, and you're going to stay there, but you think, I can make it home. And you do. And why would you make that dumb decision? Because alcohol is doing what it does. It's impacting your ability to make calm, rational decisions. So just don't do it. The number one way not to get a drunk driving charge is not to drink. Really
Steve, is impaired thinking ever been tried as a defense?
It is not a defense. Driving under the influence of alcohol is a strict liability defense. It doesn't make any difference what your intent is.
Thank you for that.
So you could be drugged.
Thank you.
If this happens all the time, people slip you a Mickey at the bar. that can still be a drunk driving charge, and often is. So
Really?
happens all the time.
Unintentional.
Unintentional. Yep.
Wow.
Boy.
Yep. So like if you're speeding, it doesn't matter if your speedometer's broken. You're still speeding.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
So
yeah.
anyway, with that dose of common sense, we will wrap it up for the
Sobering.
pre-Christmas or the Christmas edition. As a reminder, for those who want to catch old episodes of the show, commonsenseohioshow.com. If you want to get new episodes of the show, commonsenseohioshow.com. Go to where you get podcasts, Google, Apple, wherever. I don't know. Just Google it, Apple it, whatever you do. If you want your own shirt, Common Sense Ohio, you can see it right here on the table. Pretty sweet. We all have them. It's a cool thing to do. Everybody wants one. You can get yours too. Send us an email, commonsenseohioshow.com. I will hook you up by telling Norm to hook you up.
Definitely.
Right.
I had heard also in a, PSA announcement just yesterday, forget what doctor it was on one of those talk shows. And he said, there's actually medical evidence that a hug lasting, 10 seconds or so, will, do good things for your heart. And, so kindness, love, maybe Christmas isn't the time to talk about Trump versus Biden at the family table. Yeah. Maybe try to find things that bring your family together.
Yeah. So maybe watch this. One more thing. Go watch the Peanuts Christmas special. We talked about it last year.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah.
Go watch it. And it's the only mainstream show that I know of that is ever completely. I think that was the Gospel of Luke.
Luke.
Yeah.
And just watch it.
That's
It'll blow you away.
That'll
It'll give you. It brings tears to my eyes when I see it and think about it. So there is a reason for the season. I think we all have faith here. I certainly have faith. And go explore that. And if nothing else this season, take a peek. Explore your faith. Explore why we do it and what it's all about. And don't just dismiss it. But also remember that Die Hard's the greatest Christmas movie. So with that, we are coming at you right from the middle. Common Sense Ohio Show, commonsenseohioshow.com every week, in and out, at least until now.
Merry Christmas.